HOA moved in on my uncle, posted by Lil Bit Evil. About 25 years ago, my aunt and uncle moved into a new construction single-family home neighborhood on a half an acre. About 6 months after they moved in, he was informed that his neighborhood was being taken over by an HOA. He disregarded his HOA application as he did not wish to join. Not long after this, random neighbors began complaining to him directly about his boat and the cars in his driveway, violating HOA rules. He just informed the often rude people that he was not a member, that they would argue with him that everyone was a member. One of the major issues is that his driveway, garage, and front yard was on the main level of his home, and the backyard dropped down a cliff to level with his basement and backyard. So he had no way to back his boat around the side of the home into the backyard. Eventually, the HOA began harassing him with threats if he didn't move his boat to the backyard. His backyard had been closed off by a vinyl fence. The HOA installed and lined another road back there. So one day, my uncle decided to compromise by trying to take down a section of his back fence so he could make a gate for boat parking access. The HOA called the police on him for destruction of property. The police left my uncle with a warning if the fence was returned to proper condition by the end of the day. Uncle put the fence back up and placed his boat back in the front driveway. Now the fines started coming, week after week, month after month. When the fines reached $10,000, the HOA filed a lawsuit against him. He countersued for the harassment and the street access to his backyard. In court, the HOA showed the HOA boundary and showed my uncle's house was in the middle of the HOA, explained the violations, and the police report filed over the back fence. My uncle explained that he never signed up for the HOA. He moved into the neighborhood before the HOA existed, never gave them permission to fence in his backyard, provided all mortgage documentation and a blank HOA application with the HOA security stamp and date. The HOA argued that it didn't matter if he didn't turn in his application because he was within the HOA's borders. The judge declared my uncle's property was grandfathered as private property and not part of the HOA. The HOA was to immediately take down their illegal fence on the back border of my uncle's lot. Since the HOA had fined my uncle $10,000 and more in illegal fines, my uncle was owed over $10,000 in damages for the harassment. My uncle rebuilt his yard fence in see-through chain link with a gate where he parks all his toys in full view. He moved the boat from the driveway to his front lawn, let the lawn die, and paved it over, all 10 feet from his front door to the sidewalk. The HOA neighbors in the decades since still approach him to complain, and he just tells them to take a walk, knowing there is nothing they can do to him. This is beautiful. Normally the HOA tries to run over you and take advantage, but no, he stood their ground and won. Nice job. HOA mistakes me for my cousin's wife, posted by Deleted. Back when I was 18, I'm 26-year-old female now, I was helping my cousin, 30 male, and his newlywed wife, 25 female, move into their new home that has an HOA. I was carrying boxes into the house, and I was just covered in sweat. As I was enjoying some rest with a bottle of water, one of the HOA members came up to me to introduce himself. We exchanged pleasantries and then asked, "How long have you and your husband been married?" After that, I told him to please wait and brought in the actual married couple to meet the HOA member. They came out and the man's face dropped. Then he faked a phone call from the HOA and left. We didn't know anything was wrong at the time. Not even a week after they moved in, I get a call on my cell phone from my cousin. He said that the police were raiding his house for possible drugs. I know my cousin. He has a criminal record of a Boy Scout. Every time he gets a prescription for painkillers, he either shreds the note or dumps the pills in the toilet due to fear of addiction. The police found nothing and left, and they did apologize. The very next day, his wife was stopped by the police in her own driveway. They said that she was suspected for prostitution, even though she was wearing a pantsuit from her job as a cardiologist. They called her hospital to confirm her whereabouts, and she was let go. The police came back the day after that after someone claimed that his wife was breaking into their own home. How can someone break into their home through the front door and with their own keys? After a month, the HOA came up to them claiming that they are a nuisance and attempted to put a lien on the house for so many calls to the police. Luckily, my cousin's brother is a lawyer and fought against the lien in court. At court, the HOA member that met the couple on day one was revealed to be the one that sent the cops after them so they can be kicked out of the neighborhood. As it turns out, that person testified that he didn't want their kind in his perfect neighborhood. Everyone in that room was dumbstruck. The HOA lawyer immediately dropped the case, apologized to my cousin and his wife. That HOA member was kicked out of the neighborhood for racism. As it turns out, he also called the police on every black and brown person that even passed by his house. Since then, they moved out of the neighborhood after she got a better job offer in her field. I forgot to say, she is black and my cousin is white. That's blatant racism, and the HOA member deserves the punishment that he received. Nightmare HOA story time. RBF 2000 says, my at-the-time girlfriend, now wife, rented a townhouse with friends in a community that had an HOA. There was parking reserved for guests of the tenants. Ironically, parking was always an issue for my wife and her roommates, but always simple for me. I just popped on the visitor's pass and I was good to go in that lot. I spent the night probably once or twice a week, and one day I awoke to find my car missing. After some ace detective work, I found out that my 10-year-old, at the time, 5-speed manual transmission Honda had not been stolen, but just towed. When I reached out to the HOA, they told me that there was a provision in the bylaws that said a car could only be parked in a visitor spot for a maximum of 72 hours, and that a board member submitted my car to a list of cars to be towed due to abusing a visitor's pass. They argued the language in the bylaws was such that the total amount of time that a car may be parked in the visitor's lot was 72 hours, non-consecutively. For example, if you park there once a week for 10 hours each week, on the 8th week we are in violation of the policy. This in opposition to the clear purpose of the provision, which is to prevent people from storing their cars in the lot. They summarily denied my request at the next HOA meeting to recover the $150 towing fee. Long story short, I sued them in small claims court and got back the towing fee plus court cost. Plus, they engaged a lawyer, so I feel good about wasting some of their retainer as well. Deleted says, we live in a condo and began receiving $100 fines for not picking up dog poop. The area behind our building is a common area, and lots of people walk their dogs around. I offered to submit DNA testing for my dogs, and they ignored me and continued to send notices of fines. I began taking my phone with me on every walk and took photos and videos of me picking up dung with timestamp evidence. I sent a folder full of photos to the HOA with photographic evidence that I was picking up after my dogs. We continued to receive fines. I got a small trash can and kept on my patio, and I began saving my bags of dog crap for 2 weeks. I did tie the bags, but they were still obviously smelly as dung bags are very thin plastic. I then mailed a box of them to the HOA office along with copies of time-stamped photos showing I had picked it up. I told them that I had better not ever receive another fine for dog crap because I had provided more than sufficient evidence that it was not us. Miraculously, the fines stopped and we haven't received any for over 2 years. Debaser626 says, I rented a house in an HOA. It wasn't too bad, just normal stuff, but every now and then, some board members would tool around and hand out fines for dirty driveways and such. I wouldn't have cared if the president and a board member didn't live on the same street as me and their driveways were in massive disrepair. The board member's son did some work on his truck and there was a massive oil spill, partly covered with a red towel that sat there for 8 months, while a few rust-colored streaks on our concrete was worthy of a fine. The funniest was when the HOA decided to install very aggressive speed bumps. The ones that were there previously were fine. They were graded to not be too jarring, but required that you slow down. The only accident that occurred while we were there was the spouse of an HOA board member driving drunk and plowing into a tree. But there were always notices and mailings for people to slow down as this is not a racetrack. I guess they felt adding in a couple of literal asphalt curbs in the middle of the street would show people who dared to drive over 10 miles per hour on the main road. The only way over these things without feeling like you were going to break something on your car was to ease up on the first side, come to a complete stop then, and then slowly ease down the drop, once the front wheels and then another for the rear. Some people had just taken to driving on the grass around them, so they put up concrete barriers there. After a few weeks, someone decided to pour diesel fuel on the speed bumps the day before the garbage truck did their rounds. The speed bumps got completely destroyed. The HOA reinstalled the bumps and somehow made them even more aggressive, and a week later, Captain Diesel struck again. They yanked them out again and just paved over the holes. It was beautiful. They did end up installing speed bumps a few months later, but they went with the stock plastic ones that bolt to the street, which was much more preferable to the man-made cliffs of Dover that were there previously. Nigunk says, I would sit in my yard with my dog between 4 and 6 p.m. every Friday for 3 months. Why? Because the HOA would measure my grass every frickin' Friday. My lawn guy was the best and I refused to switch. However, he could only come on Saturday. The HOA let us choose which day we inspected, and everyone voted for Saturdays. They secretly vetoed it for Fridays, but claimed it was Saturday that they were coming. To prove this, I sat with my dog every Friday waiting for him. He would park, wait a while, and then go to another street and measure there. My street was the only one who didn't receive fines for breaking the agreement. It became a party when everyone figured out what I was doing. People would cook out in the front and we would all go throw coals on and food as needed. I got reported for something or other after the 3-month marker, so I brought my supercut 3 months of time stamped videos and submitted them to the HOA distribution list before I went to meet with them. There were 40 or 50 people there because we had organized a day to go and air grievances. It was maybe the best time I ever spent with any HOA. Gimp2X says, Upscale Beach neighborhood repeatedly refused my solar panel application, cited the location of them as being an eyesore, which was atop of the backside of my house, not visible from the street, and fought me at 4 different meetings, delaying my installation, ultimately cited the state law, and they immediately backed down and amended their covenants. P.S. A clothesline is a solar collection device, and they cannot deny you use of that either. So, if you want to play dirty, hang a bunch of beach towels in your yard. OP's mom and dad say, I lived in a neighborhood with a park in the center, located directly behind my back fence. The entire neighborhood was managed by the same HOA company, but the neighborhood was officially set up as 2 different HOA communities. Even though it was on the other side of my fence, the park was designated as part of the community that I was not in. On multiple occasions, the irrigation system in the park broke and completely flooded my backyard. 3 or 4 times over a span of a few months, I woke up to literally 1.5 feet of water. Over time, my brick fire pit literally sank into the ground, an entire layer of brick. Water came into my kitchen on 2 of the occasions, and every time my home's foundation looked weaker and weaker after cleanup. I called to complain to the HOA each time. The flooding almost always happened on a weekend, and it wouldn't be until Monday that they came out, leaving my home flooded for a minimum of 2 days each time. After the 3rd or 4th complaint, I finally reported them to the BBB and the Water Authority, and I sent a video to the local news. The next business day, the head of the HOA company called me furious. Despite all the pictures and videos that I'd sent, she said she was convinced I was making it all up. When I pressed her why she thought that, she specifically said it was because the park can't be flooding your house. It's not even part of the same HOA community that you live in. Scott Evil 110 says, we've only been part of an HOA for the last few months, and it's already living up to every stereotype I ever had in my head. They held our once annual meeting with very little notice, and like 6 people showed up. They elected a new association and immediately decided to spend $700 on dog crap receptacles, even though like 4 people have dogs and the whole neighborhood is on one street. This sparked an incredible amount of drama. One guy on the HOA decided he was going to get super defensive when people started questioning this decision, and it quickly devolved into him just taunting people on Facebook because he was on the board and they weren't, and if they didn't like his authority, they should change the bylaws. Then someone left a bunch of dog crap in his driveway. Then he resigned from the HOA. No word on those dog receptacles. This has all happened in the past 3 days. This one's got a follow-up post. It's called, "Would I be the butt for reporting an HOA member to the board for yelling at my friend about a mailbox color violation on my property?" Posted by Steve at Steve. I'm 19-year-old male and mom live in an HOA community that dictates the color of the mailboxes. They must be black. I recently had to put a new one in after the door broke off of our old one. While I did not know about the rule, and I put in a white mailbox. Fast forward to this afternoon. A retired man who lives in the neighborhood recently volunteered to help the board enforce violations. He does a drive every few weeks to check up on houses. Well, today he went down my street as my friend, also 19 male, pulled in the drive to work with me in my basement. He texted me that he is here. Before he made it up to my door, the friend told me the HOA dude walks up to him and starts to ask him questions, says he is in direct violation of an HOA code. My friend tells him he does not live there and the HOA dude doesn't buy it. It's been a few minutes now, so I assume that I forgot to unlock the door and he's stuck outside. When I open the door, I hear HOA dude pulling the "Do you know who I am?" card. He's raising his voice when I butt in, also not knowing much about him. He goes off about the mailbox to me and how it's making the neighborhood look bad. I told him I'm unaware of it and I will talk to my mom about painting it when she gets off work. His tone shifted. He legitimately thought two 19-year-old kids owned a $300,000 house, had no idea that my mom owned it. Things then go full bonkers mode. Dude started to cover his tracks to me, saying that my friend was the one with the attitude and sarcastically answering questions and was full of crap. In reality, my friend was confused on why some dude approached him talking about a mailbox. He calls us violators and leaves, and we both just laughed. I asked my mom on what to do, and she said it's up to me since I'm an adult now. I'm leaning towards reporting the guy due to his condescending tone, unprofessional behavior, and raising his voice at my friend who is genuinely just very confused about what's going on. I don't even think he knows what an HOA is. My friend and I joked about it once he left, but still, I don't want another person in our neighborhood to get yelled at like that. I wish one of us had taken a video to show us evidence of behavior. Most of the board is actually quite reasonable, so I could see him getting kicked out if I do report him. Would I be the butt for reporting his behavior? I did end up sending an email to the HOA and they informed me that he is facing disciplinary actions, whatever that means. My main concern was the HOA volunteer letting the power get to his head and yelling at other younger people in the neighborhood. Also, I did paint the mailbox in order to comply. He shouldn't have been a jerk. Nice job on reporting him, OP, and I hope that he leaves you alone and gets in trouble or whatever has to happen. You know what they say about assuming, right? Sue me for that 100. Dare you? Posted by John Poker Clan. This is a while back in the mid-90s. I owned a condo in Las Vegas. I bought it new and I lived in it. I don't recall how long ago I had lived there when I received a letter from the HOA asking me for my address. I just ignored it. A few weeks or so later, I received a letter stating that I had been fined $100 for not returning that other letter. I went down to the office to visit the HOA president, and I said exactly this to him. The only way I will pay this fine is through judgment, because I want to see you explain to a judge how you sending a letter to my address to verify my address and then fining me because you did not receive a response is going to fly with a judge. The reaction was priceless. He thought for a minute, and then he conversed with the other person there, which is probably an HOA board member maybe, I don't know. And then he said to her, "Could we have misplaced his letter?" Okay, no, fine. His reply was simply disjointed. I never said I did not send the letter. I simply said I was not paying the fine without judgment in small claims. He was just pulling BS. Great comment and reply from OP. Comment says, "What kind of idiot writes a letter to you asking for your address?" Probably the same kind of idiot that texts you asking for your phone number or emails you asking for your email address. True story, got a letter from Bank of America saying they were closing my credit card because they didn't have my address on file. And OP says, your reply reminded me of a little joke we played on a desk clerk at a sleepy hotel and casino that I was shift manager at. My buddy, the security guard, went up to a room and called down to the desk complaining about the phone in the room that it was not working. It was at least a half an hour before the look of clarity came across her face. I sued the HOA president for selling my house out from under me, but I'm not even part of the HOA. Click the video on your screen, you don't want to miss the crazy story here and the twist of it, and I'll see you there.